think one thing I didn't mention yet, but an important part of presenting your work is also knowing your audience. And then not in the generic LinkedIn post type of way, but like in a real way. Like, if they bring up something that derails the conversation, like that's probably something they value, something they perhaps are concerned about, or are afraid something will go wrong. We are kind of live now. This is what I always wanted to say. We are live.
And we are officially live.
We are officially live, exactly. I mean, this is just an experiment.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Nick.
Welcome to the Design Table Podcast.
Right. So back again. Back at it, yes. So last time we spoke about presenting your work, presenting yourself very briefly. I think that was your idea. So I'm very curious to hear about all the presenting tips and tricks and the good and bad stories you have from your career about presenting.
Good and bad.
And anything that went wrong, anything that went hilariously wrong, or anything that went super well. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think so. I've been at this for 15 years. I think I had my share of terrible presentations I went through, but I think I learned a lot through that process. And I think I've refined something that goes over generally well. And I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I'll give it like a 70 to 80%, just because it's the Wild West out there. But I think I've learned that you have to context matters. So who you're presenting to matters. So I think things go well when you're presenting to like your design peers and they get it. So they're looking at aesthetics, looking at the crafty work. They understand what process you went through. But if you're presenting to stakeholders, I think it's a whole different beast. I think depending who if you're presenting to like the C-suite or to stakeholder managers, there's a way to frame what you're presenting that'll give you the feedback that you're looking for. And I like to generally kind of structure my process so that I keep that story in mind. So if I'm doing discovery work, I'm always trying to understand what the problem is, linking it to a business metric that I mentioned before, and that's where I frame everything. So I do my discovery work, I find the friction point, I come up with a solution, and I'm always including all the stakeholders at every stage, so that I'm not kind of creeping up on them like, "Hey, take a look at it," and then they have no context, a bunch of feedback, and versus kind of keeping them aware of the progress, what decisions we've made, where stage are we at, what kind of feedback are we looking forward to stage. So for example, if I'm doing user flows or flow maps or wireframes, like here are the different entry points so users can come through. Here are the different actions. And I generally like to have the scope defined earlier on versus later. So we've all been there where we design this kind of grand feature with all the bells and whistles. And then when it comes to development, with the time we have, it's not going to work. So we end up cutting scope, and then we end up with this Frankenstein looking feature. And we've lost all the decision work that we've made to get it to that end state. So I like to keep everyone involved and cut early at the wireframing stages, because we're not invested in how it looks, how it works, and we can have the engineering input. But all that to say, I like to frame everything from the business lens. So I'm presenting maybe some mock-ups. Here, this is solving X problem. I would like your feedback on how this may solve X problem. And then from the stakeholder's point of view, it's less about how it looks like. It's, does it actually solve this problem? And you have a more conducive conversation.
Yeah. So that's actually, you're saying like a whole lot of different things, all the tips and tricks already. But the first thing that came up in my mind after listening to your story about this is, man, that requires a lot of planning and thinking ahead.
It does. Luckily, what I've done is kind of set up my Figma file so that it's structured in a way where I'm telling that story. So I have my requirements document, and then I have my Figma board, and then I set it up in different sections. Here's the problem. Here's the objective. Here are the personas. Here are the user insights. Here are the requirements. And this is a file that all the stakeholders have access to. I'm very transparent. You can jump in, and because I'm laying it out in that kind of linear flow so that it tells that story, they get it immediately. I've even got feedback from my manager saying, I jump into your file and I understand the problem immediately. I don't have to reach out. Like, I feel like you did this for me. I'm like, yes, I did it for everyone so that everyone has context and I'm not the source of truth. They can digest it at their own pace.
Right. Well, that's a whole different discussion, I think, because you see a lot of people talking and also asking online, like, hey, what's your Figma file like? And then usually I think the discussion evolves around like, what do you have in that top left pages window? Like, is it all in one page, or do you have pages per feature or something else? But the one you're saying, I think I haven't heard before, which is very interesting. But like, how do you structure that? Because it's, I think, for a complex project or a bigger feature, it's probably a lot of info and a lot of reading and explaining before you get to the, quote unquote, actual design. Like,
yeah,
does it look like?
I think it looks so again. So it's really structured in like how you tell the story. Oftentimes, when you're presenting to stakeholders, you're preparing for like a day, making sure that you have everything to present, and then if you run out of time, then you're left kind of maybe mumbling. It's like, oh, okay, this is what I want to present. But if you're structuring your file in a way that keeps the story or the business case in mind, you don't have to prepare for those meetings.
Right.
So I found that if I'm telling the story in my Figma files, it's maybe verbose, maybe it's extra work. I don't spend any time preparing for meetings. So I've told the story in the Figma file. I'm just regurgitating what I've already kind of put down.
Nice. Yeah, you answered my next question already. Like, hey, that's a ton of work. But, you framing it differently, like it's going to save me a lot of work in the future. That's probably a better way of looking at it. Does it link to any external places, GitHub or, a Google document or whatever, or is it all literally like full text in the file?
Yeah, so it generally links to two things. So it links to the product requirement document. So that's the document that the product managers create. So they're kind of defining what the problem is, and it's kind of collaborative effort. And then I have my own version, which is like a product design requirements document, which is almost similar, but I basically use it as a discovery document where I'm doing my research so that when product and design come together, we both have the same amount of context, and we're coming to the table with the same amount of knowledge. And essentially, it's structured. So it's problem, objective, persona, user insight, how we might measure success, and then our go-to-market strategy. So I like to frame the entire user journey. So not just what this feature is, it's how do they discover it, how do they use it, and then how do we market it, whether that's in-app or is it through the marketing channels. And I essentially just take that document, lay it out in my Figma file, and it's the same. I'm not doing the work. I'm just moving it from different contexts into a Figma file.
Right. Is there a risk of you having outdated info? Because let's say the requirements document changed without you knowing it, or are you very firm like, hey, this is the file, sign off on it. I'm going to use this one, period.
Things evolve. I think I put more weight into the Confluence documents than I do the actual Figma file itself. So those files we update because things change. Obviously, the scope may change, but everything is documented. So if a feature goes missing, I document it. I add the reason why it's missing, because we've all been there where it's like, all right, we're going to ship this, and then these 5 things, we'll do it later. But then it goes into the we'll never do it later pile.
Yeah.
The magical black box that we'll do it later. But if you document it, then the whole org understands, like everyone gets notification. This is what we're doing. We're not doing this. Here's why. But we can refer back to it when we're doing our phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's very cool. Yeah. Would love to see that file at some point for inspiration and learning purposes for my own presenting work.
What are the things you do to make sure that those meetings, those presentations go over well?
Well, I have some freelance work where it's more freelance-like. Yes, you have a freelance, admin structure to it with invoicing and that kind of stuff, but you're basically taking part inside of a company as a designer, similar to you, and then I'm just a player within the whole development cycle. And then it's more or less the same as what you're describing. My challenge has been to present to a stakeholder who is more outside of that development cycle or design thinking cycle on purpose. And then you get all these questions and feedback that slows down your process. And usually we're thinking like, well, we worked on that 3 weeks ago, but that's something that stakeholders weren't there for. So they don't know. So they ask all the questions we've asked ourselves already weeks before. That's something that I'm likely going to use your strategy for, I think. So that's very, very cool. What I'm currently doing is, when presenting or about to present, I'll make sure to send something before the meeting starts, and not just 5 minutes before, but let's say I have a meeting on a Friday, and I'll make sure that on Thursday at the latest, I send over the thing we're going to talk about. So just to continue your example, if it's a Figma file with a clickable prototype or a few mockups or all the requirements and texts that you just mentioned, I'm going to send it over on a Thursday or a Wednesday. Like, hey, we're going to talk about these topics. I'm hoping to get such and such out of it. Please take a look. To make sure we spend our time as efficient as possible. Also because my experience, meetings always run late because we get stuck on like one small question, like one thing. It's better to park or just say like, okay, agree to disagree. Let's move on to the next one. But you can free up some time by preparing your participants, your meeting guests. So to say, that's I think one of the bigger ones I'm working on for any meeting, just to make sure everyone's prepared. And I like the thing you said, which I also do, is to start a meeting with some framing and scoping. Like, hey, we're in this meeting today for this, not this thing, that's for later, but really focus on this one. Sets everyone into the same direction. And that's basically it. I don't think there's a lot of changes or different things compared to what you were saying. So maybe how you present yourself is the same regardless of your type of design role.
Yeah, I'm curious because you had mentioned something there, and I think it happens often. I'm curious how you kind of approach these types of objections when you've done the framing. So this meeting is about X thing that does X for the business, and someone brings in a topic that's not really related. And sometimes it can kind of derail a conversation and defocus the conversation when it's not really related. I'm curious what any strategies you kind of deploy in those types of situations.
My main goal always is to keep it short and get people back on track. You're the host of your meeting, so you're in charge of keeping everything on the rails. But I will let it derail just long enough for me to understand what this person's point is, so I can make note of it. And that's just me understanding and learning about my stakeholders a bit more, because that's going to be useful for later meetings. Because I think one thing I didn't mention yet, but an important part of presenting your work is also knowing your audience, and then not in the generic LinkedIn post type of way, but like in a real way, like if they bring up something that derails the conversation, like that's probably something they value, something they perhaps are concerned about or are afraid something will go wrong or take too long or be going to be more expensive than planned or these kind of things. So just to go full circle, it's good to just let them have their say for a minute. Then I'm like, oh, okay. So this person is concerned about the budget, as an example. And then I know that for my next meeting, I'm probably going to have some sort of like quick update in the beginning of the meeting. Like, hey, we're all on track. Everything's going well. Or everything's going to plan. And we're on track to make the deadline. Like that makes that concerned stakeholder like much calmer during a meeting. So long answer short, let them derail for just a minute, see what they're all about, and then put people back on track. Like, hey, noted. So you're saying this and this. They say yes. Okay, we'll work on that in a separate meeting. I'll reach out back to you after this meeting, but let's return back to topic. And then they're like, okay, and then you can continue. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think I'm probably a little less patient than you are. I think you're more more gracious than I am. I think this is more relevant when we were in person, and we were doing like a whiteboarding session. A trick I like to do is go, I'll say like, oh, great question. Actually, how about we do this? we're going to put this note on the board so that we'll address it at the end of the meeting. And if we don't get it to it, I want to have a one-on-one session with you, and then we'll let everyone know. So we cut it off immediately, but because I've written something on the board and they saw that I heard them, it's good enough. And then we're back into the topic.
Right. So I think you and we both have like the same thing, but just in, it shows differently, meaning that, we're both making sure that the person with that question, they feel heard. Like, it's not like, no, period, shut up and let's continue. Like, we are making sure they like, hey, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let's park it. Let's get back to it. It's not going to be a very strict deflection. Like, okay, nope. It's, we're still, what's the word? We're not burning that bridge. Like, we're just, we're going to circle back to it later. I like I will have a one-on-one with you about it approach. Because I don't think usually in my meetings, at least, that there's time at the end of a meeting to go through all the parked questions, because in my experience, it's a victory in and of itself if you're managing to keep everything in check and done before the end of the meeting, the time that's been set. Maybe that's me. I'm not sure.
I think that parked meeting list is good to never get to because it's not part of the meeting, but it's good. You have notes for that follow-up email. It's like, hey, thanks for everyone for joining this session. We accomplished this. Here are the items that we want to kind of address. Do we want to have a meeting for this, or do we want to have a one-on-one session? And at least, like to your point, I think the overall message is making sure that everyone is being heard, and that they feel like they're contributing. Because once they feel like they're not contributing or they're not being listened to, they disengage, and that we're not getting the information that we need from them.
Yeah, true. And maybe as a quick in-between follow-up from our AI meeting, I'm very curious if you use any tooling for the notes and the follow-up actions and that kind of thing, because, back in the day, or actually today still, like I have my meeting notebook here, I'm usually just writing and listening, but I'm sure, knowing you, that you have a smarter way of not forgetting any notes, which is something I do from time to time, to be honest, but don't tell anyone.
No problem. Yeah, I use a pretty simple flow. I have a dream of my ideal flow, but currently I just use, depending who's on the call, if it's a customer or it's internal, I'll just record the session. So whether that's a Teams recording, or I'll even just open up Otter. I don't know if you've heard of the tool Otter AI.
I have, yeah.
You have the ability to just open it up on a separate tab and just hit record. And it's basically just recording everything that's happening on your computer. I take the transcript. Otter has a cool AI feature, so you can just ask it. It has a ChatGPT kind of integrated into it. So you can basically go, depending on what type of meeting it was. So for example, if it's a design grid meeting, it has a transcript. I just go, give me all the notes or action items that I need to do to update my design. It spits it out. I'll put it next to my Figma file, and then I have a checklist of things I need to go through. Obviously, I'm in the meeting, so it's not like I'm following blindly. So I have the context, but I have these little reminders that are auto-generated. So I think for me, it's important to be engaged in listening. So it's hard for me to kind of take notes and then listen at the same time. So that flow kind of helps me kind of be super engaged, and I'll get to those notes later.
Yeah. Well, that's my challenge. Like if I'm writing now, I would look like this. Like I'm not looking you straight into the eyes, which is, I think, a little bit rude, while writing. And then at some point I'm looking down, I'm writing, and I'm like, yes, okay, yes. And then at the end I was like, I'm more like, wait, what? What did he say? So it's either listening and trying to remember everything, which I don't, because I don't think we can remember everything. Or I'm making notes and only listening about 50% of the time, which means I do take notes, but they will not be full and complete. So I might like throw away this pen out the window or in a trash can, but and use one of those tools. So you say Otter, I know the tool. So in a different tab, you press record and it records your computer audio, like your input and the output from the meeting.
Yeah.
Or like, does it turn on a microphone? Because then if I have AirPods in, like it doesn't hear you if the mic is on. Like, how does that work technically?
Yeah, it leverages whatever you're using to record, so or speak to. So you're using your headphones. If you're using a desktop mic, it listens to all of it. It also has like the capability of jumping in as a note taker within the meeting itself. Just depends on how you want to set it up. So you can set it up to come into every meeting, but then sometimes people reject it. So that happens. I just quickly kind of spark it on so that it's recording in the session. But I think the great thing about, because it records the transcript, you can leverage it for different things. So number one, I talked about having notes. So like, what are the action items for me? Also great to generate an email saying, this is like a follow-up email. Thanks you for the session. It'll type it in, generate me an email for a recap of the session with the next steps in it as well. That's done. So you can generate whatever you want based on that transcript. So it just speeds up your workflow. I'm always looking for things to be done a lot faster, so I can get back to what I need to do.
Right. Final technical question, because you really triggered me with people reject the note taker. So that's basically when you go into a meeting and then you see you see me, and then you see a third participant, which is like the AI note taker. When you have that first one, so in a different tab, it's just listening in. Does a participant get a notification from it? Do they have to accept? Or potentially, are you recording me right now? Which I know you are for this episode, but perhaps you have other AI open in a different tab.
Yeah, I think there's probably like rules of engagement for this thing. But you can record without anyone knowing. If it's in the session, then it's a bit more clear. So I'd be careful with that one. I wouldn't just record client meetings without their knowledge. But for me, it's just like, I'm generally doing if it's an internal meeting and and I know it's just for me. And I forgot to hit record, but I don't want to disrupt anyone's conversation. So if people are talking, I just want to quickly go in and record it. And I'm not sharing it to anyone except for myself.
Right. All right. Well, that makes sense. All right. So no more technical questions. That's probably not the most important part of our conversation. I'm thinking, like, we're talking now about presenting your work to clients and stakeholders, while on the job /project. But I've also been thinking about presenting yourself while on the job hunt. I think some of the, let's say, rules we came up with apply there as well. With prepping your participants and setting the scene during the meeting. But anything? Do you have any extra tips and tricks for people looking for a job as a product designer or UX designer? Like, hey, this is how you should present yourself during a meeting, virtually, in office, presenting your portfolio, like all the different steps. Any tips?
I think the same rules apply. So I think I'm bullish on like presenting the ROI of your work. So in a business lens at all times. And I think it's important during those sessions as well. So if you're speaking to, regardless of what stage you're on, whether it's my resource person, the hiring manager, maybe the team, it should always be the same. I think the framework is, so if you're presenting a case study, this is the problem. This is how we discovered it. This is some of the solutions we tried out. How did it fail? Because nothing goes perfect. So it shows. I want to know what were the different pitfalls or kind of friction points you came into, and then how did you overcome them? I think is super important. And then end it off with, here's the result, and then here's how we measured it. I think that's important. So you're not thinking just pixel pushing. It's more of framing it with the business problem or measuring it so that we can measure the ROI in the end. I think it's important to not just present how it looks, but I'm bullish on what return, back to our other episode, what's the return on investment?
Yep. I think so too. Also, I think there's a parallel, I think a very interesting one, to being on a job hunt and then to your way of presenting, like your Figma file, because you have the requirements and like the whole list you mentioned, product requirements, documents, and a product requirement list is also in a way like the job requirement list, like needs X amount of experience, needs to have all these things. And then instead of like the Figma file, where you're presenting software, you have a portfolio or a presentation or a slide deck where you present yourself. And the hiring manager, they will compare you / your work to the product requirements document / job requirements. So in that way, I think it's a good thing as a preparation to compare. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I found within the job opening. Can I check every box? Yes or no? And then it doesn't have to be a yes all the time. It can be a maybe or even a no. Like they ask for 7 years of experience. I have 6. Is that something I can overcome? Yes, I can present myself in a good way because I check everything else from the list. Or if it's like really a no, like needs experience in finance, but if you don't, well, then you need to prepare yourself and come up with a good answer for the questions you will get on, hey, you don't have finance experience. So that kind of preparation, I think, is something we would do on the job, but also when not on the job. You will have gaps in your work and in your skill list. Yeah, that's an important one. I have more, but I don't want to ramble on.
I had a mentor session last week, and it was somewhat related where she was a generalist. So as he always keeps saying, so he goes, master of all, master of none. And it was hard for her to land a gig. And I think what's the theme is people like specialists, regardless of my thoughts on it. I think generalist is the way of the future. But if you're going after a fintech company and you have a broad range of kind of portfolio pieces, I think it's good to brand yourself as, in that example, I'm the fintech person. And regardless of like the pieces of work you have, try to find the fintech in those pieces. So if it's just so that you're positioning yourself as the expert. So if I'm hiring a designer in my fintech company, I'm going to be looking for a fintech designer. So how can I, even though I'm a journalist, curate my portfolio pieces through the lens of now I'm a fintech person? I think that's super important because I think hiring managers are looking for a specific thing, and the more relevant experience, the better. But there's a way to position the work you've already done, so it meets that requirement.
Yeah. I think that's very briefly on the specialist versus generalist topic. I think my answer is it doesn't matter because you can be both. The only way for you to go wrong is if you're in the middle, and do not pick a side. It's again about, the topic of today's episode. It's about presentation. Like if you have your website and you're like, well, I'm a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's not going to work because as you're saying, like people still using Google search or LinkedIn for search or Reddit or whatever, they will search, fintech product designer. Like if you're saying, like if it's not on your website, like I'm this thing, you will not come up in search results. But then at the same time, if you're afraid to call yourself a generalist, because, what if someone's looking for a specialist and you do not put generalist somewhere, then you will also not come up into the results when people search for a generalist. So you have to pick a side, but both sides are perfectly fine. There are tons of businesses looking for a generalist and also tons of businesses looking for a specialist. It doesn't really matter, I think. So maybe that's like the underlying tip here. Like if you're presenting yourself, be specific about how you what you're saying. Like nothing should be random. Everything you say should be there for a reason.
Yeah, I think so. I agree because I think our skill set is analogous to what industry you're in. So regardless if we're in fintech, we're in e-commerce, we're in healthcare, like it's all the same process. Our process is the same.
Yeah.
Discovery, fixing it, and problem and solution is the same. It's just that you get extra at bats, I guess, for in that particular industry. That's why you've kind of seen this problem before. But regardless, we have the same skill set. I don't think it really matters.
Yeah. Well, I had that question during a job interview once. Like, okay, so our stakeholders are really tough. Like they are this type of person. What would you do? That kind of question. Like, have you worked with this type of person before? And I hadn't. And I was really honest. Like, well, I don't know. I haven't. But I think it's going to be okay. And not the best answer, but better than trying to lie on the spot and be like overconfident. But then someone else in the meeting came to me after the meeting and they said to me like, what you should have said? You should have said like, well, it doesn't really matter what stakeholder type you have. they all have certain goals. They are all human, and universal presenting skills and tips and tricks apply. So, you should have said, I'm confident that I can convince and work together with the stakeholders because I've done that before, challenging situations. So a little bit more confidence would have been a better way of answering that question. So I think that's an important one too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, because goes back to our earlier point. It's generalist. So I've seen this type of problem before, and it still applies to this problem space that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit short-sighted also. Like if you ever solved like this really specific problem A, well, no, well, then the pool of people you can choose from for your job is going to be, a much smaller if that's the way you're thinking about hiring. But if you have the great answer of, well, I haven't solved your problem A before, but I've done B, C, and D, and I've learned so many like universal ways of problem solving from it that I'm very confident that I can tackle A as well, then I don't see a problem. Like, I think that's a great answer.
And I think there's something in there. I think it's okay to be nervous also. And I think it's okay to make mistakes. So like in your example, you've seen someone give you some feedback, then you learn for the next time, and then you do it better. So I think it's in that job interview, like I think everyone's nervous, regardless of how they present themselves. So we're not all perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but it's all learning. It's all repetition and learning experience there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's also good. Like, I think we started our list of tips and tricks, in my experience, the wrong way around. Like, I feel like we're starting with like a super complex, big picture thinking, super tips. And now we're ending with the more basic tips where most people will be like, well, yeah, of course, but they're still important to mention. Like, you're just now saying like, well, it's okay to be nervous. I feel that one should have been at the top of the list, funny enough. But then there are similar ones, like if you are presenting yourself, a case study or your work, like we would do, basic thing is to be on time, for example.
Yes.
Like, that's, most people now will be like, yeah, duh. But I mean, it's still worth the mention. It's one of those tips where you will not gain points if you are on time, but you will lose points if you are not on time. So, it's nothing to be gained, but a lot to be lost. And then a few other ones are like, if it's a virtual meeting, to make sure you're in a quiet environment. It's very annoying to have background noise.
You don't want to be in a coffee shop ordering your espresso.
Example. Yeah, excellent example for sure. Yeah, or just, people in different meetings, like where you can just hear the phone ring in the background, something like it. But also make sure you're well in the frame. Like, if you are on a laptop, make sure it's elevated slightly, so it's not like you're looking like a little bit down, where people can see up your nose. And then, make sure there's enough light, make sure your camera is clean, that kind of stuff, because otherwise it gets blurry and that kind of thing. I think that's very important.
On that point, there's a small thing I do. I don't know if it converts well, but I think it does in my head. The idea of like angling your camera. What I do, again, I have a stand-up desk. I feel as though if I angle it upwards, it looks like I'm more confident, versus if I angle it downwards, it looks like I'm more submissive. So I feel like, I don't know if it's a small thing, but like just angling it in a way where it looks like you're confident. So like looking up, so like it's someone looking either eye level or down to you, feels like you're more confident. I don't know if that small thing, I do it automatically, but I feel like it converts a bit better.
I think that works. I think it's about emotion, a lot of the meetings. I used to have a manager, I think now 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And like, his main tip to me, not because I did it wrong, but just like in general, was like, you should dress better than the people you're having a meeting with. He always came to work in like very colorful suits, and it's all nicely ironed, and everything is like, could be on a catwalk somewhere, but I think that's also something, just like you're saying about camera position. Like, if you appear well and rested and clean, for in-house meetings mostly, of course, that's it's all these little like 1% differences put together make a big difference. So yeah, I mean, keep that camera angle in a good way. I think it matters.
Yeah, I think it's true. Like all these little things will add up, but they're important. And sometimes we think they're low hanging fruit, but they're low hanging fruit for a reason because they're easy. They're easy to get it done, and then it puts forward a better image towards that hiring manager.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the one that's super important. I'm trying to think if there are any more super obvious ones because I'm mostly thinking about like virtual meetings. But then what do you think about a real life meeting, about standing up versus sitting down if you're the presenter?
So you mean like presenting like in person, like standing up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people say like you need to stand up because then, to your point about the camera, you're higher than people sitting down. You can.
Oh, I definitely think if there's a whiteboard in the room, you should stand up and do a little scribbling on the wall. It shows a bit of confidence. I know when I've been interviewing candidates and they do that, I'm like, oh, this guy or gal is very engaged, and I get that view of how it would be to work with them. So they're super confident. They're sketching ideas and collaborating real time, and it almost mimics that if they were to be hired, how that would resemble.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one. You see, well, I'm on Reddit quite often, and I'm also part of all these design related subreddits. And like one of the most common questions is about like, hey, help! I have a whiteboard challenge coming up. Any tips, any tricks? And I feel like the people asking these questions are mostly looking for tips and tricks on the actual whiteboard and what you should put on the whiteboard. But I think that's impossible to know because every company expects something slightly different, I would say.
Yeah.
But I don't see a lot of comments about what you just said, like the way they're presenting themselves and the way they're working, regardless of what they're putting on the whiteboard. That's a glimpse in how it would be to work with them if we would hire them.
That's what it is. The whiteboard challenge there's so many different tutorials how to do it, but essentially all they want to know is how you think. It's to your point. It's how you think, how you work through problems, and then how it would be to work with you. That's end of the day. It doesn't matter what you put on that wall, as long as you're communicating how you think through a problem, how you solve it, and how you communicate with others. That's all they care about.
Yep. And standing up. Yeah.
Please stand up.
Yeah. And the second part to the standing up tip is that you should also, like, when you draw, it's okay to look at the board because otherwise you will be off balance and draw strange things. But when talking back to the people in the room, turn around again and look them in the eye. You don't hide yourself when you keep looking at the whiteboard the whole time, because then it's like, then you appear shy again, So yeah, that's important. A virtual whiteboard challenge. I'm not sure what I would do in that case. Maybe just talk a lot, involve people a lot, really be a facilitator instead of a participant. I think that maybe that's the most important thing. Be a facilitator in a whiteboard challenge, not just a participant.
Yeah, I think it's to be like, ask them questions. Pretend that they're your colleagues and say, hey, you're going to be the developer. You're going to be the stakeholder. All right, I'm asking questions to you. So I'm working on this problem. Here's my challenge. Hey, you're the PM. Well, what are my constraints today? All right, let me add that in. So it's keeping everyone engaged and involved.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. All right, so we have quite a list then, I would say, from tips and tricks and things on how to present yourself.
Yeah, we can just take this transcript, throw it into ChatGPT, and then create a list for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm writing articles about all the episodes, and doing some AI magic with the transcript is something will do for sure. Because like we discussed about 5 minutes ago, I can't remember everything I said, so I need a bit of help to be reminded.
I think it goes along with age as well. I'm having struggles lately too.
Yeah. We're getting a bit dumber, perhaps, because of all the AI help we are getting.
I think that's a real thing. I think we're offloading some of that responsibility and we're used to not having to do it. So that muscle's not being flexed anymore.
Yeah, True. Let me say one quick somewhat off-topic thing before we wrap up. Like, I'm very aware of us getting dumber. The first thing is I'm curious if we were, like, what I think is smart now was dumb like 50 years ago. Like, were people much smarter then? But the main thing is, because I don't want to get too much dumber. So what I'm doing now is in Figma, when I have to resize a window, for example, or when the padding is off, I calculate everything by head. Like, I'm not just like, if it's positioned at X240 and it has to go like 57 pixels, you can just type in -57 in Figma and then it calculates it for you. Now I'm just in my head, I'm like, oh, that's 183. Okay, click. And then I'm doing it manually just to stay sharp.
I like that.
Yeah. And yes, that's more work and you have to calculate on your own and it's stupid, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like I'm somewhat sharp still. So that's the off-topic fun little nugget I wanted to drop here.
No, you're flexing your math skills, which is good. I think in school we were told like we were either bad at the subject or for me it's like, oh, I'm not good at math, but it just means that you're not good yet. So I think those little things that you practice get you to a level that you need to be at.
Yeah, not good in math yet. That's a very positive way of looking at it. I like it. All right. So, any teasers for the next episode? What are we talking about?
Yes. What are we talking about? I think we're going to be talking about AI tools, correct? Or design tools and how they're going to be evolving over time. I think there's a lot of comments, or this became a hot topic in the design industry, how designers will evolve, what tools we'll be using, what kind of collaboration we'll be having with our engineering counterparts.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's a fun thing to make like a super teaser. Like, I'm going to ask you a question and you can say yes or no, and I will do the same thing, also answer. And the question slash statement is, Figma will still be the #1 design tool of choice in 2027.
I'm going to say no.
Going to say yes.
All right.
And this is not real 100% honesty. This is not set up. Like, we haven't had a meeting before this where we were like, okay, you're going to say no, I'm going to say yes. Not the case. This is really just something that came up. We're going to talk about the yes versus the no next week.
Great teaser.
Yeah. I'm learning as I go.
All right. Until next episode.
Well, that's it. See you all next time, I would say.